And I do recognize a lot of it's my fault. I assumed that Sneako was talking in hyperbole.
He's taking it back. It doesn't matter, you're gonna say hyperbole, you're gonna say, I didn't really mean it, you did mean it.
With the permanently banned YouTuber accusing him of speaking in hyperbole. Here's Nick Mercs reacting to
hyperbole. It's hyperbole, you stupid British. With that out of the way, as you guys know, I made a video on the Tom Dark channel about the debate between Penguinz0 and Moist Sneako. Moist Sneako, we call him, okay? Critical debated Sneako, and it was a pretty interesting debate. Unfortunately, in terms of Charlie, it was somewhat of a disaster, even with this crazy that Sneako was arguing for, right? It was kind of a disaster, and so I made a video about it that did pretty well. Now, I'm curious, before we get into this, what was your guys' takeaway from that situation? What was your basic takeaway from the whole thing? Because my take was like, Sneako debated better than Charlie, but his position was worse. Until I saw what Charlie said about the minors transitioning, but now Charlie is kind of, he's posting more clips clarifying how he feels, so it's kind of like, it's hard for me to completely have a total take right now until I see this new clip that's being posted of Charlie, so we're gonna see that in a sec. Charlie giving Sneako free clicks. Yeah, man, if I was him, I just never would have agreed to that debate, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm in the position that Penguinz0 was in with 15 million subscribers, I'm never going to agree to have a debate about the age of consent. First of all, in general, I'm not going to do that, and secondly, I'm not going to do it with Sneako of all people, someone who hates me, right? But I think the problem is that Charlie went into that debate and he thought that he would be fine. He thought that he would do well because it's Sneako, how could I not take him, right? But Sneako destroyed him. And also, I mean, Charlie was saying things like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be a debate, it was supposed to be a conversation, and it's like, well, okay, you didn't know it was going to be a debate, but you're talking to Sneako, what do you really expect, right? Like, the guy who is, you know, a very political dude is hanging out with like Nick Fuentes and stuff, like, you're expecting that guy is not going to want to debate you. And the thing is, what Sneako did is actually quite smart, because what he did is he got Charlie to come on his stream, he baited him, he then, you know, made him look like a fool, and now he gets a bunch of people talking about him, you know, and like, obviously a bunch of people are talking about his bad take, which is that like 15-year-olds can marry 21-year-olds, and that is a horrible, it's not even just a bad take, it's like, what the f is wrong with you? But he doesn't really give a right? He doesn't have to care because people are just talking about him. I think you have to come to the conclusion now, guys, that, you know, Sneako, love him or hate him, is here to stay, and you're probably going to be hearing about him a lot more. You're going to be hearing about him a lot more. I hate Sneako, but he's going to be around, and he is using Charlie to get views, you know? So I thought we would start out by looking at, there's this clip of Nick Mercs. You guys know who Nick Mercs is. Nick Mercs reacted to the debate a little bit, and he had a very negative opinion of Moist Critical.
Streamer Nick Mercs has weighed in on the recent heated debate between Moist Critical and Sneako. A few days ago, Moist Critical and Sneako gathered attention on social media when they connected to discuss a recent controversy involving Chris Tyson. However, Moist Critical was not pleased with the debate, with the permanently banned YouTuber accusing him of speaking in hyperbole. Here's Nick Mercs reacting to
hyperbole. It's hyperbole, you stupid British. It's hyperbole? Who says hyperbole? My 3-year-old cousin wouldn't say hyperbole. Hyperbole.
To Sneako and Moist Critical debate.
You could take hormone blockers, you could take puberty blockers, okay, when you're a child. When you're 16, you can go change your gender, but you can't get married? Why is that?
Yeah, that's a fair point. As much as I don't want to admit,
I don't know. I feel like that's a pretty obvious question.
No, it's not. It's not. See, if you cut your penis off, like Chris and Mr. Beast, if that is a life-altering decision, you can't glue it back on. You can get divorced if you get married. This is a commitment that you're taking.
Fair too.
A child, based off the liberal point of view that you believe in, they can have gender surgery.
Moist
They can change forever. Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting.
Okay, so as long as everyone...
Parents? Chat, this scene is so cooked, man. These YouTubers and these streamers and just this gaming community, man, it's just so different than what it used to be. And this world is changing. I don't like any part of this shit. How could he say that sentence out loud? Irreversible changes to the body as a child, as long as they have consent from the parents, as far as this guy Critical is concerned. What?
Are okay with it, and you are okay with it. I think that's totally a familiar decision to make, yeah.
Okay, so a child can cut their off and take hormone blockers and change their biology forever, but they can't get married?
Hell no. Honestly, don't care if anyone's trans, but you can't do that to a child. That's literally...
What is this text-to-speech British man reading Keemstar's tweet? Hold on. I'll read this instead of this. stupid video. Hell no! Honestly, don't care if anyone's trans, but you can't do that to a child! That's literally child abuse. That child turns 18 and decides to be trans! Go for it!
Child
Much
abuse.
better.
That child turns 18 and decides to be trans. Go for it. Disagree. They should wait till they're of legal adult age because young people are easily influenced. Jesus, both guys took L's with this. Moist Critical thinks children should be allowed to be trans, and Sneako believes 15-year-olds should be able to marry fully grown adults.
What are your guys' thoughts on Sneako and Most Critical?
And I'll outline why this is such an L for Critical, okay? I'll outline why this is such an L. It's because Sneako is already at the bottom of the barrel. Everyone expects him to be right. When I heard they were debating, I expected literally nothing from him. I expected nothing. I didn't expect Charlie to do well, but I didn't expect very much from Sneako in terms of maybe debatability. I thought he'd be better, but I didn't expect much in terms of like arguing a good position. The problem is that Sneako was able to not only argue what he argued, more compelling. Sneako was able to argue in favor of better than Charlie was able to argue against it, right? That is part of the problem. That is the L. Even outside of the trans take, that is a big L. And ultimately, what it allowed to happen is it allowed Sneako to legitimize himself to a certain group of people and to get a big own on Critical, and he gets to be talked about all the time. And you know what he gets to do now? He gets to constantly tweet at Critical every single day, like every single day, being like, hey, when are you going to post that debate? When are you going to post that debate? Because I think Critical said he would post it in that stream from what I remember. I could be wrong, but I think he said that. And now, once again, this allows Sneako to just constantly tweet and be like, hey, when are you going to post that? Here we have a tweet from Sneako Updates. Now, in fairness, this account is, I think this is run by Sneako. And these like Twitter accounts are also notorious for taking out of context and clipping stuff together, so we'll see how this is. But once again, they're able to say Moist Critical had a meltdown on stream and took back a statement that 9-year-olds should be allowed to transition. Harry Sisson said hyperbole on Piers Morgan. Did they? The hyperbole is like the Super Bowl but evolved.
And now I give a perspective on something that immediately gets misconstrued, and I do recognize a lot of it's my fault. I assumed that Sneako was talking in hyperbole about a 9-year-old getting their dick cut off because I didn't have the assumption that anyone thought that is how transitioning works. There is, under no circumstances, any legality behind a kid saying, I want to change genders, and then immediately going in and getting their dick cut off. That doesn't happen. I thought he was just talking in hyperbole. Obviously, no one says that's good. That's not at all what I was saying. I thought he was talking about the overall point.
The thing is, like, this is somewhat understandable that you can say something like that, but like, obviously if you know anything about Sneako, you would assume that he believes that not only are the 9-year-olds able to get their dick cut off, but he would also assume that the doctor is personally going there and Joe Biden is calling the household to be like, hey Jack, it's time to get your kid's dick cut off. And then the doctor comes and is like, I'm going to cut off your penis. Like, that is probably what you should assume Sneako believes at all times, right? That is what I assume Sneako believes. And on top of that, even if he wants to say like, okay, I thought he was speaking in hyperbole. Like, hyperbole is usually like a very an exaggeratory stretch of the truth. But like, the difference between like a kid having just like hormones and a kid getting their dick cut off is so vast that it's hard for me to understand how you could see that as hyperbole. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems kind of insane to me. Am I wrong to think this? And not only that, but also like, with the community that Charlie exists in, you know, he's a commentary channel. Some people for a living, with the community Sneako is in, you have to assume that you have to have careful wording when you're around someone like that, or else they're going to do their best to make you look really bad. And he really miscalculated that, you know, he really did. Ultimately, does this mean that I hate Charlie? No, especially because he seemingly walked back the he seemingly walked back the take. He seemingly walked back the take that 9-year-olds should be able to have their dicks cut off. So at the very least, he said that. But I think what it does do to me is it puts a lot of doubt in and it kind of destroys some of the inherent confidence that a lot of the YouTube community had in Charlie, in the Critical brand, I guess, right? Because this isn't something that he pushes, but there is this idea perpetuated by, like, you know, internet anarchists and people like that. And like, you know, I'll see it in comment sections sometimes where it's like, you never mess with Charlie. You never ever mess with Charlie, you know? He'll always destroy you. And it's like, I don't know. In this case, he kind of got owned. And recently with the sniper wolf thing, I mean, he spread misinformation pretty blatantly, didn't verify his sources, then had to walk it back immediately. Now, I'm glad that he did that, and I don't really hold that against him, considering the fact that he did walk it back. But I feel like in the future, if he has another incident like that, I am going to be more critical of him. I'm going to be more critical of Critical, because he right off the bat spread misinformation about sniper wolf without double checking. And while he did kind of, you know, do his best to undo that, in the end, he still did post that video. And I think that's, you know, a problem, and it can compromise your integrity as a journalist, you know? This is a big L for Charlie. I think he's going to be probably fine long long term, if I had to guess. I don't think it's gonna like last forever. But you know, when you have a debate like this, and like I said, even outside of the transitioning thing, because I've seen Charlie saying things to the effect of like, how could you ever say that Sneako won? And it's like, well, it's not about the position that you're arguing. The position that Sneako argued should be indefensible, ideally. But you weren't even able to argue against that. You weren't able to accurately argue against I don't think you were able to adequately justify why you feel the way you do, you know? So I think it was ultimately a pretty bad debate performance from him. And now what is Sneako able to do? He's able to get people on his side from that clip. He's able to get people to post videos of Nick Merckx being like, you know what? I don't like Sneako, but he's right. And then he's able to get this clip. Now this says Aiden Ross agrees and likes critical about children using hormone therapy. Obviously this is ironic. This is obviously a joke. People thought this was real somehow.
Hormone therapy, can they change their gender if they're a child?
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting.
I think it's cool too as long as everyone's consenting. You know what? Nick Merckx and Sneako are bigots, and you know, I don't with them.
But like clearly this is ironic, but once again, like this allows just more people to talk about Sneako. Everyone's talking about him, and everybody's going to talk about it as if it's an L on Critical's part, which is, you know, is that totally accurate? No, because you have to the position that Sneako was arguing for is. But at the same time, like, Charlie didn't look good either. And you should, I think, ideally, if you're going to debate the age of consent, try to look good. Especially when you have as big of a platform as Charlie, and you're like a representative of the YouTube commentary channels, you know? It makes you look really bad. So I wish that things would turn around a little bit. Wait, was that Madeline? Hold on.
I want to point this out, and for you to remember this, because the next step for this thing where they cut off penises and take puberty blockers, the next step is normalizing incest. The next step is normalizing people like Chris are already dressing up like wolves, already dressing up.
Oh, come on. Come
like
on, bro. Come on. That's not, don't do her like that, bro. Come on. Don't do her like that, okay? She's base. She voted for Trump, okay? Leave her alone. She's red-pilled. She's a red-pilled dog girl, guys. It's not the same, okay? Leave her alone. Leave her alone, chat. She has a pink gun. Leave her alone. But once again, I mean, now... You know, they get clips like this. Moist Critical gets cooked by Sneako for not standing on business and backtracking.
That the path you want to take, it is your body. You can do that. You can.
He's taking it back. It doesn't matter. You're going to say hyperbole. You're going to say, I didn't really mean it. You did mean it. Okay? Now you're seeing the response. And this is what I was trying to expose with the debate is that your opinions, a lot of these YouTube commentators, their opinions just match public perception. If they're getting canceled, they're going to change their worldview to go fit that because they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. He realized people don't like cutting off 9-year-olds' penises, so now he's backtracking and saying it's hyperbole. Stand on it.
That the path you want to...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Sneako's right in that specific example, but I mean, to an extent, he's right. I think there are a lot of commentators who are kind of afraid of how the public is going to see what they say, and as a result, they kind of cower to them, you know? So yeah, I mean, now basically Sneako's he's gonna be tweeting at Charlie constantly saying upload a debate, upload a debate. From what I've seen, Charlie's not uploaded the debate yet. I'm curious if he will, but it's been days and he hasn't uploaded it. Maybe he's like waiting before he uploads it to like be able to retract his take or like rephrase things or contextualize it better. I don't really know what he's doing, but yeah, we haven't seen Charlie say anything. He's getting clip farmed hard. He is, dude. So yeah, I hope that you know, I hope that Critical is able to address this in a proper way and deal with it. But I don't really know how it's gonna go. Maybe upload it to the second channel. Yeah, maybe he did. Let's see. Nice Charlie clips. Doesn't look like it as far as I can tell. Doesn't look like it, chat. I'm gonna be honest. Doesn't look like it. Why the debate even happened? I think Critical messaged him asking to debate, but I don't remember what the specific original context of it was. But I think Critical messaged him asking. When I remember, that's how it went. We do have the debate here. It is quite long. Do you guys want to watch it?
My definition is...
What do you guys think? Should we just watch the debate? It's pretty long. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but should we just watch it? I feel like I could do some decent, like, I don't know. I'm not a great debater, but I feel like maybe I could have some decent advice on how Critical could have gone about it. Most people are saying yes. It's boring. It's definitely not boring. I think I'm going to watch it. We'll watch some of it, okay? We don't have to watch all of it, but we're going to watch some of it. He said that Sneako messaged Critical, if I remember correctly, and he said that he didn't go in expecting a debate. Sneako said he wanted to talk. Okay. Well, in fairness, if Sneako's messaging you, I would always assume a confrontation, to be honest. So I think that's kind of naive.
My definition is anything under 18.
That's exactly what a child is.
Yeah, I think that is a great line in the sand. If you are under 18, you are a child.
Your scenario earlier was if a 16 and a 21-year-old, if both parties were consent, if the father was okay with it, the mother was okay with it, why not? Tell me a reason why that's wrong. Because you're getting...
One is a child, one is not a child. That's the point.
Do you believe that somebody can go through hormone therapy? Can they change their gender if they're a child?
Too.
I think that's totally fine as long as everyone is consenting. As you agree with.
Okay, so as long as everyone...
If your parents are okay with it and you are okay with it, I think that's totally a familial decision to make. Yeah.
Okay, so a child can cut their penis off and take hormone blockers and change...
I do like the crystal castles in the background. That's nice.
...their biology forever, but they can't get married? You know, I met somebody that that knows you when I went to do the Jinxie podcast.
Oh yeah, at Jinxie's place?
No, Panera Bread. That's a valid question, and I want to first ask, like, what's your issue with my opinion on the age of consent, age of marriage?
Because I feel like age of consent should just be an accepted number, and I think the accepted one is 18. Like, regardless of where you talk about in the world, I feel like once you start talking about someone under 18, you're basically just talking like a predator. Like, I feel like 18 is a pretty well-established number for most sensible people. At 18, you're going to college, you're living your own life now, you're outside of your family nest. Anything under that, you're still a kid.
I agree with that in most cases. I will say, I think that, like, there's nothing wrong with an 18-year-old dating a 17-year-old or dating a 16-year-old. I don't think there's anything wrong with a 17-year-old dating a 19-year-old, even though one of them's in college and one of them's in high school. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Charlie would probably agree with that take. But I'm curious to see if he would talk about that here. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say that this is not an all-encompassing kind of take here, but, you know, we'll let Charlie keep talking and see what else he says.
Okay. You know, it's not 18 in most of the United States where we both live, right?
Yeah, but that refers to like Romeo and Juliet laws, where if you're like 19 and with a 16-year-old, it's not technically illegal, but you're not a 19-year-old, right? So why would you be arguing for like a 16?
Well,
you know?
First off, I'm not arguing to lower the age of consent. I don't believe in the age of consent. We can.
This is the interesting thing. He's not even arguing to lower it. He's arguing to abolish the age of consent, because Sneako's position is that the government does not need to be involved in any way in what happens between these people, right? He doesn't think that the government needs to be involved in any way in sex, and I disagree with that completely, you know? I disagree completely. I think the government has to have, you know, there have to be laws in place to prevent these things, you know? I don't love everything the government does. I don't love every single thing they do, but undoubtedly there has to be some kind of law in place. To abolish it would lower it effectively, yes, it would. But yeah. What's the obsession with Charlie's opinion? He's not researched, he panders, and he's boring. People are lemmings. IMO, not really against Charlie. I just don't give a special about him. Well, the obsession is it's not an obsession. It's like he's a public figure and he expressed his opinion. So obviously people are going to have an issue if he says something wrong, right? Like obsession, like that would probably be it. He's got 15 million subscribers. People are going to care what he has to say, right? Critical is an idiot for bothering to debate Sneako. You can't make him look worse than he already does. He's an idiot for bothering to debate Sneako, but unfortunately the result is that I think he accidentally made him look better.
Get there. I want to establish some terms first.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's not even just with Romeo and Juliet laws. There's a lot of states where it's 16 regardless of Romeo and Juliet. And then you go to Europe, most countries.
Sneako should be watched. His history shows that something's wrong with his thinking process. He said so much bad stuff on the internet, yet people lash at Charlie 50 seconds response. Well, the reason why they're latching onto Charlie is because he's the guy with the good takes, right? He's the guy with the good takes. Sneako's already at the bottom of the barrel as far as most people are concerned. So it's not even surprising to me that he would argue in favor of a 15-year-old dating 21-year-old, right? Like, that's not surprising to me at all. It's not shocking. It was shocking to hear Charlie say what he said. Now he says it's out of context. Maybe we'll get more context within this, but yeah, you realize Charlie has like a legendary reputation on YouTube. People see him as like an amazing, like the greatest commentary channel of all time, and he is the most popular. So when he has a bad take, people are gonna talk about that. They're gonna be critical of him, right?
These are 16. Japan, I think they just changed it.
Is Sneako what most people believe? Do most people believe that that 9-year-olds should be able to go through hormone therapy? Do most people believe that? I don't think most people believe that. Maybe on the internet it feels that way, but like I don't think the majority of people believe that in real life, man, at all. Debate Critical? I wouldn't even want to debate Critical as the thing. I would have a talk with him about this and like his ups, but I would not want to debate him because I actually like him and wanted to do better, to be honest.
It's like 13 or 14 and now it's 16. Brazil, it's 14. I saw that from a Nelk Boys video. They were joking around about how...
Are you going to cover Ruben Sim blatantly abusing his audience ability as detractors, the re-uploads of gone fishing videos? Yeah, someone tweeted that at me the other day and I forgot to cover it on stream, but we might get to that this time. But yeah, I got to look into that more. We got to do some reading/research. The thing is, I don't really care if he bullies people. I would care if he's slandering people. That's what I would care about. That would be my position on that, you know? Also depends on like what the bullying is. If he's just like calling them mean names or something, that's whatever. I don't give. If it was worse than that, you know? I saw people claiming that there was like doxing going on, but I would have to, read into it more. The child transitioning thing is one of those things where there's literally 10,000 times more people angry about it than the actual trans children that go through with it. It's a tiny, tiny issue IRL. I would agree. Yes, I would agree that overall, I think a lot of the trans hysteria is overblown. Not because I Not because I agree with transgenderism as a concept fully, because I have a decent amount of, I think, criticisms of the trans community online and what they believe. But the actual like percentage of them that exist in real life, I think is probably really, really small. The problem is that online they're just so vocal, so you hear about them more, so it seems like a bigger issue than it is, you know what I mean?
They should, like, when in Rome, they're in Brazil, so they might as well sleep with a 14-year-old, right? Or across the world, 18, I want to see, like, why do you think 18 is the age of consent?
How would you rank Sneako as a debater? Far better than the average person, but not great, you know? When he has to be around anyone who's actually good at debating, like Destiny, he instantly crumbles and fails, you know? Like, compare this to, like, him talking to Destiny about the age of consent and how, like, brutal it was for him. It was horrible. It was, like, absolutely horrible for him. But then he talks to Charlie, who's not a debate guy, and he just, you know, Charlie doesn't look that great.
Because that, right now, is the one that makes the most sense. I guess to piggyback off what you're saying, so if you're traveling right now, if you go to Europe, are you going to be comfortable, like, hooking up with a 16-year-old? Like, just because it's legal there, would that make you feel comfortable?
No, I don't hook up anymore. I'm not
saying that you do, but I'm saying if you were, you know, single and looking for someone, would you feel comfortable with it being a 16-year-old if it's in Europe versus US?
I wouldn't do that. Like, I would not have sex before. I think sex, like, out of wedlock altogether is something that we should not encourage anymore.
This is, like, the super interesting thing about Sneako's position. His position isn't that fucking a kid is bad because they're a kid. His position that fucking a kid is bad if it's out of wedlock, but if you're married, it doesn't matter, which is insane, by the way, which is completely insane. It's completely insane.
Anymore. And having the age of consent, having that idea encourages people to have premarital sex, right? Just that term, age of consent, means you're consenting to something that we shouldn't be doing. So no, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. Okay, so then instead of let's take it away from like premarital sex, would you feel comfortable marrying a 16-year-old? Like, would you meet a 16-year-old with romantic intent if you're in Europe and maybe marry a 16-year-old? Nothing sexual. I probably wouldn't personally, because I don't think that I'd be on the same mental playing field. I like to have intellectual conversations.
And this is the weird thing that I noticed in this debate. Like, Sneako on one hand is willing to acknowledge that like 16-year-olds intellectually are not on the same level as a 21-year-old, right? Like, they're just not. And it's not that there aren't smart 16-year-olds, but like on average, the intellectual capability is just not there. And even beyond that, like the life experience and the things that person has gone through and their their abilities are like far below that of a 21-year-old. And he'll recognize that in his own life, but for other people, he won't condemn it. I don't know why. Maybe it's like a Muslim position. Maybe he has friends that are 16-year-olds and he wants to defend them or something and not call them weird, but I don't really know.
I like to be with women that are around my same age, because then I can have conversations. I like to relate to them. You know, I think there'd be too much of a gap. But other people, like, if they're able to
Would you feel comfortable debating Sneako? Maybe with some prep, maybe. I don't know. I tried to debate him a long time ago. This was like a year ago, because he had challenged me to a debate or something. I don't even remember what on, but he had said that any commentary YouTuber who made a video on him should debate him. So I was like, I'll debate you, and then he just didn't let it happen. But the thing is, I don't think Sneako would even let it happen if I wanted to happen, because he would only do it if it would benefit him and get him clout, firstly. And secondly, I honestly don't know if I would win in a debate against him, right? I don't know if I would. I think I would do better than Charlie. I don't know if I would like win, quote unquote, you know? But yeah, no, I never debated Sneako. I tried way back in the day.
To get along, then I don't see why that's so much of a problem.
But why don't you see that as a problem? So for you, you're recognizing like this person's much younger than me. It is a kid. Like, you are talking to.
Okay, so let's define these terms. Before we even get into, let's define these terms before we even get into this conversation. What is a child?
I would use the age of consent. Under 18 would be a kid in my eyes.
So a 17-year-old who's 364 days, that's a kid?
Yep, I'm gonna use very hard set terms. If it is under 18, even if it's 17, 364, that's still a kid.
That's a kid. Okay.
And that's the thing, like, this kind of position, I think, is very weird from Charlie, right? Not that Sneako is right, but the idea that, like, the 1 day difference makes you from not a kid to being a kid is kind of dumb, right? Like, is Charlie basically saying that if somebody was 17 in 364 days and a 25-year-old has sex with them, he'd call them a pedophile. But if they're 17 365 days, making them 18, then he wouldn't call them. Like, it's kind of a strange position to take, you know what I mean? It just is. It is. The problem with Sneako's debating is that he asks you to justify morals. You can't. They're personal beliefs. That's completely wrong, only waifu. You can absolutely justify your morals and your personal beliefs. Like, you can absolutely explain why you think something is wrong. I mean, maybe some people can't. I think the average person probably can't, but I think if you're going to have a debate, you have to be prepared to justify your position on something rather than like, that's just what I believe. That's my personal belief. You know what I mean? Because like, if that's all you can say, then the other person can run circles around you, and that's the biggest issue here, right? Like, obviously, in Charlie's position, typically, where he's, like, recording pre-recorded videos, he doesn't have to, like, really explain himself because the audience that agrees with him can just kind of, like, latch onto that. Like, you know, that's not a problem for him. But then when you're having a conversation with someone who is, like, looking to figure out where your moral center stands, and what do they call it? What's, like, the debate bro term? Axioms. When you're explaining your axioms, right? Grounding your axioms. Okay, if you can't do that, if you haven't done that, then in a debate you're gonna look really bad. You just are. And, like, I think that, you know, on one hand, Charlie said he didn't think it would be a debate. I don't think that's a great explanation because it's Sneako. Like, what do you think is gonna happen? It's Sneako, bro. It's Sneako.
Okay, so right now, I think it's important to have these hard lines in the sand where it doesn't have this kind of wiggle room.
Okay, why does that define kid?
As I said earlier, at 18, at that point, you're going out of high school, you're going to college, you're living on your...
Axioms of definition are decrees. They are what they are because they are, haha. Okay. Axiom. A statement of proposition which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true. The axiom that supplies equal demand. Okay, but you can still explain an axiom, right? Like, nothing is just self-evidently true, right? Hold on. Grounding your axioms. Is this a term I can look up? Oh, Destiny subreddit. Here we go. What does it mean to ground your axioms? I know it's a bit late. I'm kind of trying to come up with a definition for this meme around REM since, like, last week. It means to have a theory of meta-ethics, i.e. presupposed normative claims from which all ethical judgments stem. Without having a theory of meta-ethics, many of your ethical beliefs will be a reflection of social pressures, idolatry, basking in the reflected glory of your preferred intellectual champions, or merely assumed without being critically examined. Because of a theory of meta-ethics, it allows us to critically examine our ethical judgments. So essentially what they're saying here is that if you're going to have an ethical position, you just need to be able to explain it, right? Through philosophy or through, like, some kind of reasoning. And Charlie wasn't able to do that. He just wasn't.
You're no longer, you know, a child under your parents' roof, for the most part, extenuating circumstances, of course, but at that age, you are starting to become independent.
Like, once again, like, if you believe the kid is wrong, you should probably be able to explain why pretty well, right? Charlie was kind of able to explain his position, but when Sneako pushed back, he wasn't able to go further than that, right? That's part of the problem.
You are no longer just in your parents' household a kid. You are now going off into the world on your own.
You do admit that that varies for most people, right? A lot of people don't move out of their parents' homes until they're 25, 26, 27. A lot of people don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people graduate high school 16. A lot of people graduate high school 20. It's a huge variable. So to set that in stone is that this is when you're a kid and this is you're an adult, that doesn't apply to most people. So why would you define a kid and an adult if it doesn't apply to most people?
Because it needs to be defined. Otherwise, you can get into this really gray area where you, like, a lot of the things you say can be misconstrued as you wanting to have sex with a 15, 16-year-old.
Who construed that?
A lot of people, because, I mean,
I don't think anybody
clips
thinks
that I played in the video, you were saying, like, the age of...
I think there are definitely a lot of people who think that. I don't think Sneako wants to fuck a 16-year-old, honestly, but it is weird that he's, like, obsessed with arguing for why you should be able to.
Maturity, the age of development, and then you use 16 and 17 in that clip. So, like, for the age of marriage.
The definition of an adult is 18 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fine establishment right there. Anything under 18 would classify as a kid. I think that's important.
Okay, but you're getting that from what? From personal experience, from the government, from the law? Because that's legally in America, that's when you become an adult, correct?
Yeah, legally.
So you're following the government's definition of an adult.
I think there needs to be a definition, and that one's been around for a long time, and I think that's the one most people accept as the closest to.
I mean, this is a position from Charlie I generally agree with. And what Sneako goes on to do is he goes on to argue, like, oh, well, that's just what the government says, right? The government just says that. The government decided that. And it's like, that's not really true, though. Like, obviously, Sneako is very conspiratorial about the government. He doesn't believe that they represent any of the people's interests. But, like, realistically, at the foundation of the government, the reason that laws are passed is because collectively, we as people vote, you know, certain officials into office to represent us, and they then pass laws that are, you know, based on our morality. So we as a society have decided that, you know, there's an age of consent, there's a line, and that's where the law comes from. Now, obviously, sometimes there are laws that the people don't agree with, and those laws should be repealed. But, like, that is, in a society, that is the existence of the government, right? Like, to represent the people, to represent their interests. But what does a developed mind even mean for someone like Sneako and the justification of marrying someone who's a minor? Regardless of religion, age, or old customs. Yeah, of course. I agree with that.
To, like, yeah, this is when you become an adult.
It actually hasn't, right? 200 years ago in the 1800s in America, the age of marriage...
Yeah, we can't live like that. We're so much more advanced than that. Why would we play by those rules? Because at that point, are you going to start arguing that we should be able to start wedding 12-year-olds? Like, is 12 too young?
That's not the point. I'm saying, you're saying that the U.S. defined adult as 18. Well, I'm saying 200 years ago, the age of marriage in America was 10, and the UK was 7.
Was it? Hold on. I want to be on a Watch list. Age of consent in America in 1800. In the 1800s, the age of consent in the United States varied by state, ranging from 7 to 12 years old. Holy. In 1885, Delaware's age of consent was 7. Oh my God, that is crazy. That's nuts. Was this practically enforced back then? Was it? Back then, I don't think that, I think it's unlikely that people back then were marrying or fucking 7-year-olds regularly. I feel like that would probably be shamed, but why does Sneako know this? Well, because he's like a age of consent expert, right?
Right, so if the government decides to change it, you're saying it's 18. If the government, maybe if Kamala Harris gets elected, then the new legal age of an adult is 25. And there could be reasons to say that. They graduated college, they don't leave the house until this age, their brains don't develop until they're 25, your frontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. A lot of people aren't making serious money, they're not able to live independently. A lot of things that you could use to classify an adult don't happen for the new age American until 25 years old. So if Kamala Harris raised it to 25, would you then say that that's the new age? Would you agree with that?
I think that'd be totally understandable. Like,
would it be understandable for the age of consent to be 25? What? Is that understandable? I feel like that's not. I feel like that is not actually understandable at all. So if you're 26, you have sex with a 25-year-old, that's illegal? Or you have to have a Romeo and Juliet law for that? That seems absolutely insane to me. Ugh.
Like, I think that's fine.
So then does that make anybody who sleeps with an under 25-year-old, does that now make them a pedophile?
No, I don't think necessarily that makes them a retroactive pedophile.
So then what's a
It's an accepted definition of 18 for a long time. Is
not for that long. Not for that long, and not through most states, and not through most countries across the world.
Do you see why this is like a weird take to have though?
Your brain isn't fully developed till 25. I mean, yeah, I know that, but I don't think that means that at 24 years old you're unable to consent to sex with a 27-year-old.
I don't think you're coming at this from a place of you wanting a 15-year-old, are you? Like, to go back to that question, is 12 too young? Do you think 12 is too young?
I think 12 is too young for me, yes.
Well,
once again, he says for me. He says 12 is too young for me. So do you think that around the world, 12-year-olds should be able to marry 20-year-olds and have sex? Is that what you think, Sneako? This is a 12-year-old child. It's a prepubescent child. It's a 7th grader. Should a 7th grader be able to marry a 20-year-old? No, for me. Like, what is wrong with you?
For you, do you think 12 is too young in general? I feel like that should be an easy answer.
12 is too young in general, correct? Because,
okay.
Yes.
Thank God.
I want to define,
but
what you're saying, your definition of adult is not even the actual definition. Do you know what the definition of child is? Like, anybody watching this can Google it. You can Google it too. The definition of child is somebody who has not reached puberty yet. That's the definition.
Yeah, and then you get into like the abibophile or whatever as a...
To be clear, I think it's ephibophile or hebophile. Bebophile. When you're a bebophile.
Opposed to file, and those are all...
I don't know. I have no idea what those terms are. I don't know what that is. But
I feel like also the thing that Sneako is not talking about here that I'm surprised Charlie didn't bring up is like there's stuff beyond physical maturity, right? Just because puberty happens doesn't mean that person is mentally mature. Like there's like physical maturity and then there's like mental maturity, right? Like obviously a 16-year-old girl sometimes will look relatively identical to how she'll look at 20, but that doesn't mean that you should be her because she's mentally She's not old enough to understand the ramifications that come from having sex with someone who's 20 years old, or I'd say over 20 years old, you know?
But I'm saying that's the actual definition. When somebody reaches maturity, it's based off of biological and physical maturity.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it varies for everybody.
Thank you, Moist Gorilla.
Adulthood is not something that you can set in stone because it's different for the entire world. I moved out when I was 14. A lot of people don't move out until they're 25.
Yeah, it's for the entire world. A lot of the world is... Not all cultures are created equal. Some of them are worse. Some of them, especially in the past, have been moronic. Moral conundrum. What's more ethical? Dating a 25-year-old adult with an IQ of 80 or dating a 16-year-old with an IQ of 150? Wow, what a hard question, Mr. Hobbyist. Thank you.
I went through puberty when I was 17. A lot of people went through puberty when they were 13, 14, 15. It changes for everybody. So for you to say that this is
the lowest age of consent is in Nigeria, 11, followed by the Philippines and Angola, 12. The age of consent is 13 in 3 countries, Niger, Comoros, and Burkina Faso. Yeah, so should I be looking to these underdeveloped third world places that in many cases are holes? Should I be looking to them for my morality on the age of consent? Okay, there are countries in the world where people still have slavery and kill each other over a sandwich. Should I be looking to them for morality? No, I would never. I would never say, oh, well, around the world sometimes it's like, you know, accepted in like certain places. Like, dude, some of these countries are holes, okay? What is it in Bulgaria? Good question. Bulgaria's not third world, but I'm not sure if they're technically first world either. You might call them more second world, but I'm not sure. Bulgaria is often considered a second world country, which is a term that originated during the Cold War to describe countries that fall between developing and developed nations. Upper middle income nation. Its economy is powered by construction, mining, services, which include tourism and agriculture sectors. Age of consent, and I look up file researching this right now. It's 14 in Bulgaria. This is the same minimum age as 6 other European countries, including Austria, Estonia, Germany, Hungary, Italy, and Portugal. The age of consent is 14. Has a provision for those who are over 14 and do not understand the characteristics or the importance of the act. Interesting.
The set in stone age, and say you're if it's under 18, and then if you're over 18, you're fine. Well, then that's a weird line that doesn't make sense. So you're going to say this person is a terrible person if they're 17 years old, 364 days, and right after that, they're good to go. Well, it changes for everybody. So we have to have something, a definition. We have to...
Yeah, it changes for everybody, but the reason why you have a law in place is to prevent exploitation of children, right? So like, for example, the age of consent being, let's say, 18 federally in the United States is probably good. That's a good thing. We also have Romeo and Juliet laws to understand exceptions, like a 17-year-old dating a 19-year-old, where technically one is over the age of consent and one is under. We still recognize that they're close enough in age that there's no abuse necessarily going on, right? So that's why we have that kind of exception in place.
Be realistic with everybody. Well, we don't. But you're saying we, but that's not even the case in the country we live in.
Why argue against it? If you don't want the age of consent to be lowered, why are you making arguments that the same people who do make? Right now, what you're saying is kind of what NAMBLA used to say, if you're familiar with NAMBLA.
I have no idea what this is.
NAMBLA was the North American Man-Boy Lover Association. They were
because these people don't want, they want to have sex to take advantage, and they want...
The reason Sneako cares about physical age is people he hung out with, like Muhammad Hijab and Sheikh Uthman Ibn Farouk, make the same argument. So he's just parroting what they say. Is that like the Muslim justification in their case?
They don't abide by the rules of marriage. They don't have any sort of morality. They just want to have... I'm arguing for this because I believe in marriage. Sex should only be within wedlock. That's why I'm talking about this.
Why, if you're arguing, we can take sex out of it. Why, when you're arguing for marriage, do you want it to drop? Like, okay, 16.
When did I say, just because I don't believe in the age of consent does not mean that I want it to drop. Like, see, that's where, like, the internet can go apply that just because I'm saying...
Well, no.
But, like, if you don't believe in the age of consent, then it will necessarily drop. If you don't think there should be any law enforcing that child predators don't molest children and collect child, then the age of consent will effectively drop because you won't be able to enforce it. So you need a law. You need a law in place. You need the police to exist.
Because you're saying the definition of an adult is 18. I'm saying that's an arbitrary number and that makes no sense. We should encourage marriage when people reach maturity. That makes much.
My biggest issue is, why is there an age of consent below 18 at all if you have to be 18 globally to make? You're telling me you can legally but not film it. Tells me it's wrong already. I mean, the reason why child is outlawed is because there's an industry that profits off of abusing children and exploiting them to make that, and then pedophiles can get off on that and feel their sick urges, right? Child exists based off of the back of human trafficking and like children being abused. That's why that law needs to be enforced.
When someone can legally drive, they should be able to legally marry. You did say that to me.
Right. When somebody is legally ready to drive, the same thing. I think adults should drive cars. That's why I told you that.
Yeah, but 15 and 16-year-olds can drive cars. You said when someone can legally drive
across the world, 15 and 16-year-olds can have sex too. I think that people should not operate. But see, you keep thinking that I'm saying this because I want the age to be lower. That's not what I'm talking about at all.
Notice Sneako's also always going for 2 to 3 years of difference, not 10 to 30. Yeah, I mean, the thing is 2 to 3 years of difference is not an issue. The problem is like these vast age gaps that are like clearly abuse, right? But the problem is that like Sneako will never justify the in his own life. He'll justify it in other people's lives and say it's fine. And the bigger problem here is that, once again, Charlie's not doing a great job explaining himself, I don't think. Man, I don't know whose idea it was to follow up Gay Pride Month with month, but it has not been a good month for them, has it? No, it has not. Half the older person's age plus 7 is a good age gap. Yeah, that's the standard a lot of people use. Let me think. So I'm gonna be 22 in August. So 22 divided by 2 is 11 plus 7 is 18. Yeah, I probably wouldn't date an 18-year-old though, just because they're pretty, to be honest. I feel like I've changed a lot since I was 18. I wouldn't be for me to date an 18-year-old, but like I probably just wouldn't want to do it because they're idiots. No offense to any 18-year-olds in chat, but yeah.
That's what it comes across as, though. When you
maybe with the internet brain, because people in the West, they want to have sex all the time and they have a different sort of mindset, right? Here in the Middle East, I'm in the Middle East right now, they want to get married and then have sex. So people, just because I'm saying this does not mean automatically lower. No, that's not the case at all. I want to ask you then, man, because you're insinuating that it sounds creepy and that I sound like a pedophile. What's the definition of
it is an adult who is attracted to children.
Yeah, it comes from the Greek word pedo means child and phile means love. So somebody who loves a child.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. An adult who is attracted to a child.
To a child, somebody who has not reached physical maturity.
Yes.
That's the definition of child. somebody who hasn't reached physical maturity. It has nothing to do with 18. The definition of the word talks about physical maturity, not the U.S. government definition that you're basing it off of.
But the thing is, like, it's not just the U.S. government definition. Like, the government didn't magically come up with it. Like, we as a society have decided that there's a certain age at which children can consent, and then the government enforces that, ideally anyway. Obviously, sometimes they don't enforce it. The government can be... As far as I know, the Giggly Goon Clown, an actual pedophile who was grooming a ton of children, is not in jail, as far as I've heard. So they don't always enforce it, unfortunately, even when given evidence. But, you know, ideally, that's how the government works, right?
But there needs to be an agreed upon place. Otherwise, you get into this area. Again,
yes, Charlie is right about this. He's absolutely right.
You said when you can legally drive, you should be able to legally marry.
Right.
We don't have to talk about sex. Do you think it's okay to be marrying a 15 or 16-year-old? Probably not, right? I would imagine probably not.
It depends. So this is where the age of consent becomes arbitrary. I don't even believe like that consent is a weird thing to even speak about, but it should be the father, right? If I want to marry a girl, I shouldn't even just get consent from her. I should get consent from her parents. She should want to say yes. Her parents should want to say yes. That's consent from the family, and then you get married. That's
though, because the family is not always doing a responsible thing. Are you aware, Sneako, that sometimes parents will allow their children to get groomed because they don't think there's anything wrong with it? That doesn't make it right. Some parents are... Generally, parents are good, but the reason the government exists is because they recognize that sometimes people cannot govern themselves. Typically, they do, which is why you don't have a ton of pedophiles walking around on the street. They're a bunch of murderers, but sometimes they don't, which is why the government passes laws that they can then enforce with law enforcement through the police or through federal law enforcement to punish people who do like this. Like, once again, like, the problem with this argument is that Sneako is essentially making the same argument that Charlie made with the hormones for children, but from the other side. I would like to think that I'm consistent on this issue. Not only can children not consent and understand the gravity of hormone replacement therapy or cutting their dick off, but they also can't understand the gravity of having sex, which is why I don't think they should be able to make that decision, right?
That's the Islamic way. That's the only way that makes sense. This American way of this girl wants to have sex now, she gave consent, and then you get all these false allegations like, oh, she was drunk, oh, she took it back, oh, she retracted consent. All this stuff, like there's not even a specific way that we can define consent. What is consent? Some people say it's yes, some people say it's like nonverbal communication. Some people say that it doesn't count because she was under the influence or she was intimidated. Even this is an arbitrary...
But it's not arbitrary. Like, just because people have varying opinions doesn't mean that you can have a real opinion on an issue like consent, right? Like, consent is when she says no and you keep going. That's what consent is. I feel like it's relatively simple, right? I feel like this is a very easy thing to understand. Obviously, there's nonverbal consent, you know, because sometimes, let's say you're hanging out with a girl, typically the way that sex goes, okay, not that I would know because I don't have sex. Typically, the way that it goes is not, would you like to have sex with me? And the girl's like, yes, I would like to have sex. It's not as robotic as that. But like, if she says, no, I don't want to have sex, and then you go gorilla mode on her, you rape her, that's okay. Like, this is... Well, if she's super drunk and still says yes, it's not consent. Yeah, generally I would agree. Like, if you're completely sober and she's like super drunk, you probably shouldn't be her, bro. That's what I would say to that.
Is a weird way to define when you're allowed.
But if you're in a relationship, it's a little different. You probably still shouldn't do it, but if you just met a girl and she gets super drunk and you're not drunk and you then like her, that's probably not that's probably not good. If you're consistent, should circumcision be legal? Should circumcision be legal? I'd have to look into like complications from circumcision more, but probably not. My instinct is telling me no. But I'm circumcised and I don't really care. But that's just me, but my instinct is telling me no. You probably shouldn't be cutting cutting babies' foreskins off, if I had to guess. Can two drunk people consent? Probably, but things can get messier there. In the debate between Inspiring Philosophy and Daniel, whatever that name is, there's hard data brought up that shows 18 isn't arbitrary. Gotcha. Sneako has a loose goose. Sneako is trying so hard to justify and harming child ideologies. People have really lost the plot and ethical common sense. The thing is, this common sense thing is, I agree, but like the problem is, like, I think a lot of people don't, like, especially influencers, right, who make pre-recorded videos, they don't know why they feel the way they do. So then when they get in a debate, they look really bad, right? So I think if you're going to get in a debate, you have to be able to justify your position before you get in there, generally. That's what I would say about that.
Allowed to be in a relationship with somebody.
Critical in no way lost that debate. You just haven't seen it or you're coping.
I'm talking around it, though. Those are all very different things. Like I said, we don't have to be talking about sex. I was talking about marriage. The question was, do you think, and you said when you are legally able to drive, you should be able to legally marry. Do you think it is okay for an adult to legally marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
Okay, well, by my logic, if the man is physically mature, if he's went through puberty and he's mentally ready at the age of 16, he's an adult. If he wants to get married to another girl who becomes a woman,
I just said an adult. Is it okay for an adult?
Right, and I established, but we haven't even established exactly what an adult. So if somebody goes through puberty and they're physically ready, they're biologically ready, they're an adult. So the two 16-year-olds can be considered adults by my logic.
We're not talking about two.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about an adult.
That is an adult.
You're arguing it. It's from the
what I'm saying
is
that so then what is an adult now?
Okay, we'll use your age. Someone who is 25. Is it okay for someone who is in their 20s to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
The answer is no.
Explain, when you're doing your arguments, it's coming from an adult. I've never heard you say, like, two teenagers should be able to marry. Like, I haven't heard that with these takes. I'm talking about someone in your position in the 20s. Is it okay for you to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
But teenager, even bringing up this term that has nothing to do with child and adult. So there's two phases. You're a child, and then you physically mature.
I don't know why you can't just answer.
But once again, just because you're physically mature doesn't mean you're mentally mature. Like, obviously you will continue mentally maturing throughout your life, but there's a certain point at which, like, it's obvious that you should not be allowed to consent to sex. Like, when you're 15 years old, you haven't even had a job yet, right? You can't consent to the ramifications that come from having sex with someone who's in their 20s.
I'm saying the difference between a child and adult is when you're physically and when you're.
Sneako saying he gets his morals from the Quran was the funniest part. Muhammad's wife was 10. Yeah, I've heard this so many times, bro. I haven't read the Quran, so I don't know if that's real, but that's obviously been a big meme, right?
You're biologically when you're mentally ready to have kids. That's the teenager is not even.
But like, just because you can physically be impregnated doesn't mean you're mentally mature enough to understand what can come from that.
So you added another term in this. It goes child and then adult. You mature and then you're physically ready.
Well, I didn't add it. You brought in two 16.
Yeah, sometimes 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds will be fertile, Sneako. You shouldn't be them. You shouldn't be them. Just because they have eggs doesn't mean you should them.
We were talking about an adult and a 15 or 16-year-old. I was not the one that brought this into the equation.
Right. If it's illegal, if it's illegal, because we believe in Islam, we believe that we should obey the law of the land. If that's illegal, okay. if that's not permissible, then we don't do it. We don't break the law.
But I'm talking about your personal beliefs. Do you think someone in their 20s should be able to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
To someone in their 20s should be. I mean, I personally wouldn't do it. I don't know many people who would do it. The maturity for people and the teenagers in the West is getting much worse, but there are.
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for, I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore, anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage where the father consented and the daughter consented, and it was both good on both families and they wanted to do it, why am I going to get involved?
Because 15-year-olds are and they cannot consent to marriage or sex. That is why. They cannot consent to marriage or sex with someone who is far older than them. They cannot. They just cannot.
Why should we get the government involved?
Why should we get the government involved? Does Sneako think that any government involvement is bad at all? Is he just like, is he totally anti-government? I thought he was like basically an authoritarian. I thought he was like I thought he was pro-government. I feel like I'm getting juked. Or is it just he's pro-government except when they enforce laws around
Why would I tell them if everybody's consenting, if everybody's okay with it, if the parents are okay with it, if nobody's being harmed, if it's going to be okay, if they're both abiding by the rules and they're not hurting each other, why not?
But they're still
mentioning that the parents have to give permission just shows that the person isn't old enough to make their own decision in the first place. Good point.
Still, like, they're at best a sophomore in high school. They can't consent to something like that. Like, do you think
okay, so now it's sophomore in high school versus senior in high school. What's the difference? Like, what's the difference maturity-wise?
I'm just saying, like, I'm giving you a perspective on where that age would be in life. Like, they can't consent to something like that.
That's probably you're bringing up an outlier that's probably not going to happen as much. I'm saying that
but just because it's not going to happen as much doesn't mean you shouldn't crack down on it when it does, right?
These are arbitrary reasons to say, like,
it's not arbitrary. What is arbitrary about it? Arbitrary implies like meaningless or like whatever. No, it's not arbitrary. Maybe you can say it's relative in some cases, maybe, but like there's nothing arbitrary about a child getting. Okay, I'm sorry.
A sophomore versus a senior in high school, how much different were you really maturity-wise? It wasn't that much of a difference. The reason that you keep saying 18 is because in California, where they post Hollywood movies, it's 18. And so everybody across the world, is this where we get into like Jew stuff? Is this going to be Jew stuff? Who controls Hollywood? So the standard that we believe in, this is the correct age, exactly on the dot. And if it's anything under that, are you going to say here that if a 21-year-old got married to a 17-year-old who was almost 18, is that 21-year-old a file?
I would say that is a morally bad thing to do for sure.
Not morally bad. Not morally bad. Is that?
I wouldn't call it. No, I wouldn't call them a.
So when does somebody become a pedophile?
I would say when you have this position, you are.
You're not answering the question.
You are. I'm explaining it.
Okay.
When you are in your 20s and you start preying upon someone who is still a child, a 15, 16, 14, anything under 18, a 21 and a 17-year-old.
But you still haven't specifically defined what a child is.
I did.
So then why? Okay, there you go. So if pedophile is love of children, and your definition of adult starts at 18, if the 21...
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing, right? Okay. This is the thing, okay? Just because you're not a pedophile doesn't mean that it's wrong. Sorry, doesn't mean that it's not wrong, okay? Just because Cody Ko, 17-year-old Tana Mojo, doesn't technically make him a pedophile because he's not attracted to children, okay? Because Tana looked the same at 17 that she looked at 18, doesn't mean that what he did is good, okay? And it's not that it's not good because it's out of wedlock. It's not good because she's 17, okay? She's a high schooler. Cody Ko should not be a 17-year-old.
1-year-old marries a 17-year-old who's turning 18 tomorrow. He is a pedophile based off your definition.
As I said, if he would wait, he would not be. Then yeah,
well, not wait. Based off your definition, that person's
in that position. There is no reason to not wait for the legally established, agreed upon definition of when you stop being a child.
Okay, so now we get into the question of whether the pedophile thing, is that a moral answer or a legal answer? Because it seems...
Okay, but laws in an ideal world are informed by morality. The law doesn't just come from nowhere.
It's like morally, you know, it's pretty much, okay, it's almost there. That morally, that's not a pedophile. Legally, it is. But those are two different things.
Debate Sneako. The thing is, if I said that, Sneako would just say, oh, well, the government doesn't actually represent your interests, and then bring up 5, like, examples of ways that the government doesn't actually represent people, right? That's what he would say. He would say, you can't trust the government because they're run by Jews or something like that. Ask Sneako if he was mentally mature enough to consent when he consented for his girl to get slammed. Jesus. That would end the debate. The thing is, that wouldn't end the debate because there's nothing of substance really going on there. That's just memeing him, right? And I think part of why Charlie thought he could, you know, debate him in an ideal world is probably because he could just mock Sneako for that, right? Genuinely curious, would your stance be different if it happened in like Michigan where the age of consent is 16? I mean, the stance from a legal perspective would be that Cody probably couldn't be charged, but I would still be like, that's wrong. I don't think 25-year-olds should be 16 or 17-year-olds.
Things.
But they don't need to be. They,
yes,
they can coexist. You recognize that, right?
No.
Like,
then that's when you muddy up morality with the law. Now you're allowing the government to determine morality, and that's where things get muddied up, because if they changed it with like they did before, like 200 years ago in the 1800s when it was age of 10, that was fine. Legally back then, they were not a pedophile. Today, legally, they are a pedophile. There's no consistency there.
But
you can't allow the government to determine morality because it changes all.
The government doesn't determine morality, though. They don't just arbitrarily determine morality. We vote people into office who then pass laws to enact the will of the people, okay? And it doesn't always work that way. America is not perfect. In fact, I would say there's a lot of issues with our democracy right now, from what I can tell. But, you know, if you're talking in a vacuum like Sneako is, yes, the government determines when I poop, lol.
All the time. Tomorrow, if the U.S. government legalized bestiality, if the government legalized incest, based off your logic, there'd be no reason why that's wrong. Can I ask you, Moise, do you think that incest is wrong?
Yes.
Why is incest wrong?
There is under no circumstances any excuse for anyone of the same bloodline to be romantic like that. By no...
Tom, I think the issue is the day argument. I agree it was wrong of Cody to do, but it probably would also be wrong if she was 18 and 1 day old too. Yeah, that's fair.
No means at all.
Why?
I really think...
But in my opinion, that also speaks to, like, if Cody did that, Cody's morality, because realistically, okay, from what we know about the situation, okay, essentially Cody knew she was 17. He knew that someone else knew and was like, that's wrong, and he acknowledges it's wrong to Gabby Hanna, and then he does it anyway, right? So to me, that shows that his urges were so strong to Tana Mojo that he didn't really care about her age, and it didn't really bother him, which is very up. Okay, so to me, if he's willing to do that, that would probably also justify him being a 16-year-old, right? He could probably justify that in his mind because his moral compass is... He doesn't even care about the consequences that could come from it. We need to spit roast Sneako. Back shots are on the way. Well,
it should be pretty obvious why.
I don't know why. I'm asking.
Even I know where you're going with this because I've heard this argument from another streamer before about like
Destiny, by the way, is who he's talking about here. Destiny is Voldemort. Can't say his name.
The ethics of incest. If they don't have a kid and thus don't pass down like bad genes that lead to a bad child. I've heard this before.
But I want to hear your answer, because are we going with legal or are we going to follow some sort of morality?
It is
some sort of consistent morality. Why is incest wrong?
Incest is wrong because I believe that no family dynamic should ever include a sexual relation.
Why?
I don't think that, because it is not healthy. It is a bad thing to do. It is a horrible thing thing to subject someone to.
But why is it horrible? Because who told you that?
It's what I believe. And also, if
this is part of the problem, right? Like, it's what I believe. I believe that is what Charlie believes, but if you're going to get in a debate with someone like Sneako, right? A conversation where he's like picking apart what you think, you've got to be able to explain it. And this is how he got so caught up. This is how he got so caught up and looked bad in this debate, right? Because even though Sneako is seemingly arguing an indefensible position, Charlie was not able to explain himself.
If you do have a child with your own kin, the child suffers.
Okay, but say it's two brothers, two gay brothers, Chris Tyson and other Chris Tyson and Chris. If they're two brothers and they decide to be in a no, genuine question.
This is kind of funny, not gonna lie. Chris Tyson and Chris Tyson, Chris Tyson. Chris Tyson.
It's what you believe in. I want to figure out where your beliefs come from. You personally believe that.
My beliefs come from a place of what I believe to be moral, where I don't believe that anyone...
Charlie has no capacity for expounding on his beliefs and thought he could just say, of course, it's bad and leave it at that. He's never thought beyond the initial ick factor of this ever. It seems that way with this particular thing, yes.
In the same family has any position to be romantic with one another. I don't think that that's a
your morality
dynamic.
Comes from yourself?
My morality comes from, like, the world around me. I don't have...
Okay, so if the morality comes from the world around you, then by your logic, if you lived in America in the 1800s where the age of 10 was okay, and where the age of 7 was okay in England, just 200 years ago, if you followed the world around you, that would be okay. That was fine.
And it's not now because we've evolved past then. Like, we are significantly further along to recognize this was a bad thing. People evolve. Like, people, like, here, we'll go even stupider with this.
So your morality is ever changing. It changes with the people.
Morality is changing. Like, you are not born and then stay the same the entire time. As you take in more information, as you grow, so does your understanding of the world. That's how it should be.
Let's see where this goes.
Let's see where this change.
Okay, let's say we continue this and morality is ever changing. And then you, Moist Critical, you're living in America and now everyone around you now believes incest is okay as long as you don't have a child that's going to come out deformed.
Then I would disagree with it.
So your morality does not come from those around you. It comes from somewhere. If your morality comes from around you, you would agree with everybody that's there. You would agree with the government. No, you would agree with the law of the land. Where would you get?
Everyone has their own individuality.
Individuality has nothing to do with morals. Your personal.
It does, because your morals are formed from your personal experiences and from what you take in around you, from the people around you.
I agree with what Charlie's saying at a base level, but he should still be able to explain this a little better. If he could even explain it 10% better, he would have done way better in this debate. And I think Sneako would have had a hard time getting him.
Okay, but if you take it in from the people around you, then incest would be okay if everybody was doing it.
If you personally didn't agree with it, it wouldn't be.
But the problem with what Charlie just said is, like, my morality comes from the world around me, which would imply that. And that's why Sneako's getting him so caught up right now.
Like, if you want, like, I don't know why you're doing the argument a little incorrectly, but I know where you're trying to go. But the point is, like, the fact of the matter is, people will always have their own perspectives on things, unless, of course, you just follow what you are told 100% of the time. Like, for you, you're pushing back against the age of consent because you don't like being told that this is what it is based on this. You believe that, well, actually, there's a couple other extenuating circumstances in these cases.
That's not what I believe in. My belief comes from something that's consistent.
If incest is bad because of genetic problems, isn't that also a pro-eugenics argument? If people aren't related but will have defective kids, it's bad? If people are related but have defective kids, it's bad. I guess.
Listen, it comes from the Islamic way. It comes from the Islamic way because nothing else makes sense. The Western way is...
I mean, if there was a way to determine, right? If there was some way to determine prior to people having a kid that the kid would necessarily suffer as a result of his birth or have some kind of like genetic defect or something like that, if we could determine that definitively ahead of time from science, then I don't think there'd be anything wrong with like making those parents second guess, should you be having a kid if the kid's going to be retarded, right? There's a really interesting movie about eugenics in the future. It's pretty good. It's called Gattaca. Have you guys seen that movie? I think it's a Showtime original. Yeah, this movie. It's got Ethan Hawke. It's essentially, it takes place in the future, and it's a future where basically parents can modify, because obviously we're all based off of DNA, right? It's essentially in a world where parents can work with scientists before the child is born to modify the DNA to make them the best. So they can be like, we want them to have brown eyes or brown hair or be this tall or have this, right? And it's essentially about, it's two brothers from a set of parents, and the first one was born without eugenics being used to, you know, like edit the gene code. So the first brother, played by Ethan Hawke, he is just he's born with like a heart condition, right? He's born with like a heart condition. But then his brother is born stronger, faster, all of that, right? Essentially, Ethan Hawke's character wants to be like a rocket scientist, but his parents are like, oh, you'll never do it. You've got this problem. You'll never be able to do this part because you're not athletic enough. You've got a heart condition. And essentially, he runs away from home and ends up becoming a janitor and changing his name. But the whole point is that he wants to go to the moon, right? I don't want to spoil the movie beyond that, but it's a really, really interesting movie. Really, really well done. I would highly recommend it. Yeah, very, very good. I'm not going to spoil the end or anything like that, but highly recommend watching it. Gattaca is a good take on why eugenics are wrong. I would say, yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's a story about the triumph of someone who, like, despite not being born with the greatest genetics, he was able to prove that through his actions and through his work ethic and through his, you know, basically lying to get in the good position that he wanted to be in, he was able to accomplish his goals regardless of what the genetics he was born with were, right? It's a very inspiring movie.
Is always adapting, and now we allow people to change their genders, something that was admonishable only 10 years ago. See, you're following the ever-changing morality. Only 10 years ago, a man becoming a woman was a mental illness. It was something that was shamed upon. 10 years ago, if Chris Tyson was going on a Mr. Beast video and he was there dressed up like a girl, and he was saying that I'm taking puberty blockers, hormone blockers, everybody would admonish him. In a lot of places, he would be excommunicated. He would say...
You spoiled it? Yeah, honestly, I guess I did. I guess I did spoil it. My bad. You should still watch it, though.
Absolutely, I do not want kids to take hormone blockers and change themselves forever. But today, that's allowed. Today, that's pushed. Today, that's okay. And then everybody else kind of falls into suit. There are a small minority of people in the West, people that believe in God, they say that this is absolutely wrong, and then they get banned for it. You can't follow the people that are around you, the ever-changing morality.
You can't follow a line of questioning. You keep going off onto these tangents. Look, at the end of the day, man,
it's not a tangent.
You can believe whatever you want to believe, but the point is, people are always going.
No. You cannot believe just whatever you want to believe. You cannot.
You are doing.
If you believe.
Have you gone over the Zach Justice allegations? I have not.
If bestiality is wrong, you should not be in society. If you believe incest is okay, you should not be within the community. You should be excommunicated. These are things that there's some certain morality that should supersede the government. That should supersede something. The government should not.
The age of consent for you?
It's not the age of consent. It's
you should stay on topic here. Because
I'm staying on topic.
What you are doing is you are deflecting to other topics. You have still not directly said that you think it is a bad thing for an adult to marry a child. Like, you are still unable to say that. Now,
but you haven't even defined child.
I have. My definition is anything under 18.
That's exactly what a child is.
Yeah, I think that is a great line in the sand. If you are under 18, you are a child.
It's not a great line in the sand. But that's not even the definition of child. You're going off of your own definition.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Like, who cares? Yes. Why? If 18 is the established point, you are out of high school going to college. If that is the point where everyone has agreed, you're.
The thing is, it is kind of a who cares thing. I basically agree with what Charlie's saying, right? Use the word minor. Use the right word, minor. I mean, I feel like that's a little pedantic.
An adult past this point, why argue against it?
Why argue? Because if the government decides to push the age of high school, if they try to lower it, if they said that you can vote at a different age, then your morality changes based off of the law. And I'm saying that you need to have a consistent morality that does not change with the government and that does not change with the people that live in your country. It has to supersede that.
And I basically agree with what Sneako said there.
You can't just say because of high school, because of college, this is the set in stone age forever.
Okay, I want you, Sneako, to set an age in stone right now for the age of consent, age of marriage. What is that to you?
I told you that there is no age of marriage.
Yeah. I think we've seen enough of this, but you guys get the basic idea, right? I think Charlie didn't do a great job justifying his positions. I hope that someday he can. Hopefully he gets better at it, but he just didn't do a great job.